A lot of people ask me, why are all those big companies located in Northwest Arkansas? And I'm not sure there's anything else you could do.
How you process risk, and then as you've taken over since 2012, what does that risk look like, in your tenure?
The sooner you can think through those kind of 5 things and kind of begin to balance those, the better.
How do you create a culture like that where leaders can come into their own?
That element of grace with a healthy dose of all this is true. And this was a really hard season, but here are the things that could have done very differently and had a much better outcome.
What are some differentiators that you feel like at Simmons we do this and it is part of our DNA, it's part of our culture?
We built our own clinics over 20 years ago. That's, I think, a big differentiator.
What is your vision for the future of the next generation in Northwest Arkansas?
Well, that's a big question.
We want to give a special thanks to our presenting sponsor, Greenwood Gerhardt. Starting with my parents, for years, they've helped my family feel at peace by having a team we can trust build our finances for the future. One thing I love about Greenwood Gerhardt is how directly involved the team is in the holistic planning of our finances. We can regularly check in with our advisor and know that they see the full picture of our family, even between generations. I know they're adding immense value to so many lives here in Northwest Arkansas. And to learn more about Greenwood Gerhardt and their suite of services, you can visit their website at greenwoodgerhardt.com or hit the link in the show description. Now, let's dive into the episode.
Good morning, Todd.
Morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're sitting here in Siloam Springs in the main office of Simmons Foods. And I mean, your family has had one of the biggest impacts here in Northwest Arkansas, the community and just business, people's lives, all the above. And I'm excited for you to kind of tell some of that story. I was trying to think first, though, what is your earliest memory of working in Simmons Foods?
Wow. Well, so that would probably be an official paycheck came in 1990, the summer of 90. And I was working at our Jay, Oklahoma plant. Mm-hmm. And my first memory was we used to do tests on folks to see if they had different like carpal tunnel or other things. And I failed the test. And I thought, oh my gosh, my first thing I did, of course, the nurse who was doing the test on me, he was like, I'm going to get fired. Like not many people knew who I was. I showed up and was going to start working.
My name's Todd.
Yes, yeah. And I couldn't start working because I had to have a surgery actually. And it was probably from basketball or something. I had developed a cyst or something. And so it was kind of funny. So I started almost a false start, got right back to work after that and started working in the plant. And in fact, my boss or my boss's boss, I guess at the time, was running the plant. He just retired last week at 63 years of tenure here at Simmons. And so he challenged me that first week I was back and could work on the line to a live chicken hanging contest. And so here's a 17-year-old kid, and this fella, I don't know how old he was then. He was probably way younger than I thought.
Yeah.
But it was really fun. Yeah. So but intimidating too. So,
sure.
Yeah.
Talk about the poultry business back then here, just kind of growing up in this area, the region specifically. There's a lot of bigger players now. I don't know what it was like back then, but
there were more companies back then, but in the 90s, Peterson Farms, but still George's, Tyson, others like that were, still very impactful in the region. And it's been interesting to see the consolidation, but then also the fact that 4 of the 5 big players, I guess Hudson Foods was there. They got purchased by Tyson, and we bought Peterson in 2008. So I think it's been a little consolidation, but there's still just great people, lot of wonderful farm families that
Yeah.
that grow chickens and support an awesome protein for the world.
And so many people have moved to Northwest Arkansas now. They may not know. I mean, is there something specific about the region, the state that, that it's almost like this poultry capital in some ways? Like, is there something special that?
It's interesting. I don't know why completely. I know why we're here, and I can get into that. But really, back in the day, it was the George family and the Tyson family, and then a lot of other folks who were either in the feed business or grew live birds. And in the early days, today we're an integrated industry, so vertically integrated, where we own sort of farm to table the process. And back then, there were folks that had who had a feed mill or a company that might grow, or a farmer who might grow birds and buy feed from the feed mill. And then my grandfather was in Nebraska working for Cudahy Meat Packing. And he had buyers who would go to the Kansas City live markets and purchase cattle, pigs, and chickens, haul them live out to western Nebraska, and they process those animals and then distribute meat to a lot of different folks. And so at one point, he had a customer named Frank Plus who said, Bill, I need more chicken. And he asked his folks who were buying chicken in Kansas City, well, where are these chickens coming from? And said, well, they're all coming up from Northwest Arkansas. And so he said, well, I guess that's where we need to go to get more chicken. And so he had his first employee, a guy named Wallenchuck, heck of a name. His son was the dean of the business school at JBU for many years. But Joe Wallenchuck came down as our first employee. He's an accountant and started the business. Well, we didn't, it really was just getting a license and finding a spot. Yeah. And he came down here and started processing chicken. And so he was a processor, a dedicated chicken processor. Back then, mostly they were meat packing companies that did all different types of meat. So,
and that was in 1949.
1949, yes.
I want to kind of tell this whole story, but let's zoom out first and talk about this, the company as a whole, what all the company does right now, because there's three main arms of the business right now, correct?
Correct. So we've got what we can just say chicken.
Yeah.
So the chicken side of the business is for people, and we do about 60% of the business is food service for major restaurant companies in North America and Southeast Asia. So we do a lot of different products for many of the brands that you run up and down the street seeing and hopefully eating. Just order chicken whenever you're out there. And then about 40% of our business is retail. And so we do value-added, fully cooked, breaded, portion control products for retailers. And
all private label.
All private label. Some control brands where a buyer may want something to come in for football season or something to that effect. And so, but we debone all of our product and then further process it in some manner. And our operations and our poultry business are in the central part of the country, really Arkansas, Missouri, and Oklahoma. And then we have our animal nutrition business that takes a lot of the parts of the chicken that people don't eat and upgrades it into animal feeds and or pet food ingredients. And that business has operations on the East Coast and then here in this region. And we supply the large pet food manufacturers, folks like Nestle, Mars, General Mills, Hill Science Diet, those kinds of people, and then our own pet food business. So we have a pet food business that is all wet pet food. It's canned pouches and plastic cups like a yogurt cup, et cetera. And that business is about half contract manufacturer for the large pet food brands, and then half private brand for major retailers across North America and really the world. So all three of those businesses have grown over time. Most recently, they kind of grow in different seasons. So chicken tends to grow in pretty large chunks. And so with that, our animal nutrition group grows. And then our pet food business has grown very steady and very rapidly over the last 12 years. So it's been great.
Let's go back to the beginning of the story where you're at. So,
right.
Grandfather Bill,
Mm-hmm.
1949, comes down to Northwest Arkansas, and just want everyone to know kind of the impact of the legacy. But talk about his journey in the business there, getting started, and did the business move to Siloam under his leadership?
Yes, we built a facility here in 1952, and that operation, who knows what the actual facts are, but the facts, as we like to say, is at the time it was one of the world's largest chicken production facilities, because there really weren't many that, like I mentioned before, that were dedicated solely to processing chicken. And so my grandfather was a real innovator. He would try just about anything. And so in the 50s, most chickens were still, the feathers were taken off and they were bled out. But a lot of times they were sold New York dress with the viscera still in the bird. And so they were iced, et cetera. Now, then eventually it progressed to eviscerating the bird, and that viscera needed to go somewhere along with the feathers. And so quickly my grandfather got into the rendering business, and that's where our animal nutrition business started back in the early 50s. And so we would cook that product down into protein meals and sell them to pet food manufacturers and cattle feedlots and that sort of thing.
And was that the product that Sam Walton's dog there was a partnership there? If I read that right, or was that later on?
That was later on.
Okay.
And so, but soon into the 50s, my grandfather started innovating into other chicken products like canned chicken. And so one of those products was a whole chicken in a can, which was interesting, to say the least. I can't imagine it, actually. But
on the shelf now today.
Wow. Yeah. And so, but he was trying to figure out, how do I fully cook chicken? And one way is in a can. Well, whether it did well or not, it didn't fill up the production lines. And so he decided to pivot and start producing pet food. And so our famous story is that he had a Ford Econoline van that we built a replica of recently when we built a new plant in Dubuque, Iowa. And he had one of his chicken salespeople, a guy named Dink McKinney. I love the names. Back then we had a guy named Blondie Berlin, who was a truck driver, and but really cool names. Dink, my grandfather allegedly said, Dink, we're going to start making pet food. I'm going to fill this van up. You can come back whenever it's sold. And so luckily Dink kept coming back. And eventually he started selling product to this guy, Sam Walton, who had started this business, Walmart. And we don't have any receipts from the Five and Dime, but we were selling, Dink was selling in this region to all of the various co-ops and anyone who carried pet food, our brand called Bolo dog food. And so Bolo has since been retired, but back in the day, the story goes after my grandfather passed away, my dad was running the business in the late 70s. Mr. Sam called him and said, "Hey, your Bolo dog food sells better than my Walmart brand. And I'm wanting I basically would like you to produce for me, and I want to change the name. I want to name it after my favorite bird dog, Old Roy." And Dad said, "Well, sure. Send me a picture of Old Roy. We'll make up a label and we'll get it started." And so that's the origin story from my dad's perspective on the start of Old Roy and the relationship with Walmart on that particular product. And today we produce a lot of their Special Kitty, their Old Roy, and certainly have gotten to grow as they grew, and it's been a great relationship.
Sure.
So that's fun.
But yeah, that was when pet food really started to take off, correct? And that, or right, maybe a few years before then.
Yeah. So we probably in that time period in the late 70s were growing, but we were a chicken company that did a little pet food, and pet food became more of a serious part of our business. And then in the 2000s is when we really started to make very intentional investments to acquire and grow our pet food segment.
Bill's, as he was growing the business and then, transitioning to your dad, what was, going on during that stage? And
Sure. My grandfather, as I mentioned, big innovator, obviously a huge risk taker and entrepreneur. And Dad tells the story of just Dad had to take care of cattle. So we were in the cattle business as well. And partly not because my grandfather thought it would make money, but that's what people who were successful did where he grew up. And so, and that's how my dad says it. And so one of the first things that Dad did when he took over was get out of the cattle business. And so, but I think, the fun part about the legacy of innovation is we've been able to carry that forward. Now, one of the things that my grandfather was not a proponent of was the vertical integration of the industry. Part of that is because I think he was very consumer back focused person. His innovation was all about what does back then the quote housewife want, and how's that going to evolve? And he was going to run to skate to where the puck's going, right?
Yep.
And it felt like if we focus on live production and making feed and hatcheries and all these other things, it'll move us away from thinking about what the consumer wants. Sure. And there's some neat sort of interviews like this where he talked about that. Now, the unfortunate thing is he was sick. He got sick and was in and out of the hospital for like 8 years. And my dad, he ended up passing away. My dad took over when Dad was 26 or 27. Wow. And the business was a successful business, but it was during a hard time in the poultry industry. And so the chicken business is notoriously cyclical, and the cycles can be pretty severe. And so Dad took over we were not vertically integrated. The rest of the industry was had already moved or was moving that direction. Owned hatcheries, owned feed mills. And so we had not owned a hatchery or a feed mill. And so that was a sort of a catch up that my father started to do. And Dad was, whether by maybe he had to, but he's very focused on how things work. And he's very focused on production and that sort of thing. And so it's interesting because I think I'm probably more like my grandfather from the perspective I grew up on the sales side of the business, certainly worked in the plants and understand ops, but I'm more inclined to the consumer backside. So who knows what the next generation will be like. But so my father took over when he was young and really played a lot of catch up in trying to get to where the industry was from a productivity and efficiency perspective.
And what year was that?
1974, 75. Okay. And then he continued to grow the business. We made some relatively large acquisitions in the early 80s and then into the 90s and sort of began to build the base of what we have today.
Sure. Yeah, the 80s was a decade of acquisitions, essentially. Just a lot of
and early 90s on the chicken side of the business.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember watching your dad go through those acquisitions? Some of the memories you have, even a series of acquisitions like that from a capital perspective is intense, not even mentioning the actual execution side.
Sure.
So what are some of your memories from that time period?
I remember riding with he and Lynch Butler, who was Dad's right hand person for decades. Was my boss for a while. Great person and family, and so riding in the back of my dad's car with he and Lynch, visiting plants. Getting car sick because the roads in northeastern Oklahoma and southwest Missouri and in this part of Arkansas are crazy. And as a kid, and just I was 10 maybe when they were doing this, and just hearing them talk about the opportunities, but then also seeing the blood, sweat, and tears side of things and the personal guarantees that I didn't really understand or know, but I knew there's a lot of stress. And so to grow a business at any stage is challenging, but he was taking some significant risks to try to get Simmons to a place where we could compete with some of the bigger players. So,
wow. And then so you said like 1990 is kind of when you stepped in as late teenager and kind of working in the business a little bit. Talk about the 90s. Talk about your hands in there, some shape or form. Your dad's still at the helm here. What was that decade like there for the business and you?
Yeah, I think so. I spent time in the summers during college working in the business as an hourly team member in all different aspects, and just trying to understand how the business worked and what it was like from the perspective of our team members. And that was awesome, invaluable experience. I think that as I moved into, I started in sales and doing sort of route sales in the West. We supplied back then fresh chicken to Kentucky Fried Chicken and some large retailers. And so I spent time going store to store, checking on product and that sort of thing. Learned a lot. We were in the 90s moving towards a more value-added mix, less fresh. We in the late 90s built a fully cook operation and continued growing that direction. We purchased a company that did portion control product for large restaurant chains like Darden and Chick-fil-A and some others. And so that was certainly a steep learning curve, because before we had some really challenging customers, but the product mix was not as challenging and the specifications weren't as tight. And we were really learning, sort of assembling the airplane while we were flying it at some points, moving into the value added arena and those really challenging customers. So it was a good time to be on the sales side of the business, because you had that baptism by fire of really understanding when you were winning with customers, and then when you disappointed them, what that felt like. And so that is probably what is most etched in my mind. And how do you really grow a business in a way where you move into new markets, move into new products without stubbing your toe and disappointing your great customers as you do so.
And did you ever doubt or were confused on if you wanted to take the next leg of the race with the family and the legacy? I mean,
no, I think I was, for some reason, always, this was my dream job. Like I'm so blessed to be able to be in this position. I do think certainly there were times maybe when other people wondered, should he be here? And so I think that I was in meetings and in roles that I luckily quickly figured out I knew less than the people who worked technically for me, and that I needed to flip the script and understand I really work for them and need to view, whether you call it servant leadership or whatever, at the end of the day, my job is to make sure we align with the culture, we align with our team members, and how do I remove barriers and help set strategy and direction, but how do I help our teams be as successful as they can? And when you are in a role where you know a lot less than folks that are working for you, you need to quickly figure that out, or you are not going to be successful. And so I've always wanted to do this, and luckily my dad was a great mentor and still is. He's still chairman and still very active, and that's a blessing. I have friends that have a similar role in their family companies, and their fathers, had poor health and maybe passed away early. My dad had that experience, and that'd be really hard. And so I've been blessed in that way too, to have him hanging around and giving a lot of input, and it's great.
Well, leading up to this, spoke to multiple people inside and outside the organization, and what I was shocked, because multiple people told me, like, the culture is real there. Like, hey, just make sure you talk about the culture is real there. And I was like, okay. But I assume this started with Bill, and has just evolved over time. I mean, the values that are on your website, how did that start within the family, and how has it kind of grown in the organization over the years?
Well, I think when I was maybe 5 when my grandfather passed away, 4 or 5 years old, and don't have any memories that are probably real core memories. I have stories that and pictures of me with him. But the legacy that he left was one certainly of innovation and entrepreneurship, and two, one of building a business with some great people. And the ability to sort of challenge and lead a group of people is great, but also to let them run ahead and lead, I think was one of his great legacies.
Mhm.
And he was also an industry leader. So he just because we were a smaller company didn't mean he wasn't trying to help drive where the industry needed to go next. And I think my dad took that and ran with it. Um, but I think the core culture of putting people first and really building a place where people would want their kids to work and their friends. I always say we're pro nepotism.
Yeah.
We want, but only the family members who at Thanksgiving dinner are helping clean up the kitchen at the end. You know, like we don't need the ones that are sitting on the couch. You know, we want people though to have generations that have worked here and contributed, because that means you've built a place that people want to be there, and they have that same. It's different, but similar investment in the legacy of the business and that stewardship mentality. So, I think I credit Dad with taking the like that bootstrap entrepreneurism, the innovation drive of there's got to be another or better way, and then transforming that into how do we recognize and empower our people at all levels, and build a culture that is based in integrity and really is a great place to work.
Sure.
And what are some differentiators that you feel like at Simmons we do this and it is part of our DNA? It's part of our culture.
Right. I think, look, there's a lot of great companies in Northwest Arkansas, and we've been fortunate to sort of grow up around the, you know, all of them: Walmart, JB Hunt, Tyson Foods, George's. All these companies in their own right have cultures that have gotten them where they are,
Mhm.
and so you can. The fun part is sitting there going, "Wow, okay, that's pretty interesting. They did that, and it's been effective." You know, we've been really focused on how do we meet our team members where they are, and build a culture around our values. So, and really, when we had our chaplains program came from the Will Gardner, who was our head of payroll. So you don't want to upset Will, and so he's signing your checks. But he came to us and was like, "Hey, I've got an idea." He was a preacher on the side, if you will, and he said, "I think we ought to have a chaplain program." And um, our head of HR at the time, Steve Gardner, they weren't related, Will and Steve Gardner, but they were like, "I really think we need to do this." And I'm like, "Okay, well, let's do it." I talked with Dad, and it was really an opportunity, again, meeting our team members where they are. How do we come alongside people in the times where they celebrate and the times where they're mourning, in the challenging times in their lives where they need someone,
Mm.
not to be, as I tell our chaplains, we are not wanting you to go around whacking people over the head with a Bible. That's
Yeah.
not our
Yeah.
MO. We happen to be a Christian family. We are a faith-friendly organization, but those values are very clear and evident, and we want them to be in our workplace. So we have 26, I believe, chaplains throughout the organization. Some of those are part-time at some of our smaller facilities, but we had, I believe it was over 11,000 through the third quarter, 11,000 discrete visits with team members
Wow.
and our chaplains.
Hmm.
And what we're able to do is really, it's an employee assistance program that is turbocharged
Yeah.
through faith and really help people find resources they need, help understand why maybe their performance is not where it used to be, or they're not able to make it to work consistently, and try to figure out how to help. That's, I think, a big differentiator.
Yeah.
And having a system where you can really understand on a confidential basis what are the broad challenges that we're seeing across our team.
We're all people.
Yeah, we're not just widgets that, or and so how do we understand what the challenges are? And with that, then we've iterated different services like our clinics. We built our own clinics over 20 years ago, and understanding that a lot of our team is their shift work type jobs. If they take off to take care of their health, it's a pay cut. So if they have to take off a day in any week to go take care of their health, it's a 20% reduction in pay. So what if we build clinics that are accessible near our operations? And so now I believe we've got 5 operating, and we're now shifting into telemed and trying to understand how to deliver services to all of our locations 24/7. And we're going to figure out how to do that. So it's been wonderful for our team. We're self-insured, so we have the ability to control costs and on that side. And really, the more folks we can get through our clinics, the better, because it's fixed cost. And if we can see people and help them with their health, then great. So I think those kinds of things are differentiators. It's not directly producing more chicken or pet food or animal feed products, but it is creating a differentiation, as you asked, and I think a value that you don't get everywhere. So
good.
And so, I mean, that was early 2000s. I mean, that was early
Yes.
adopting
yes,
that as well
Yeah.
too. I want people to
Yes.
understand that it's not like it's like
Was that an ideation between your dad and you? I mean, because that seems pretty aggressive in general.
Yes.
Coming from I used to work at a big company, and then, but even the timeline of it 20 years ago makes it even more aggressive of an
Right.
idea.
Well, I think what we were seeing is that we had a demographic, and like I mentioned, folks that work on an hourly wage and shift work that were really trying to manage budgets. And but what we also saw was an inordinate amount of emergency room visits and cost. And so team members would wait until they absolutely had to, or it was an emergent situation, and then they had to go to the doctor. And when they did, it was a terrible situation and extremely expensive. So for the team member and a self-insured company. And so it became almost obvious. It was the same Steve Gardner and that same group of people who were like, we should do this different. Let's see if we build this thing. And the ironic thing is, I'm like, yeah, just charge $20 and for a visit. And that's way less than what a charge was. And no one came. And then, so I said, charge 10. And then finally I was like, well, hey, if you're a part of our program, make it free. And then people started coming in droves, and that was great. So that was sort of our first recognition that, oh, this makes a ton of sense. Now the challenge is then, how do you maintain services, and what does that look like? And so we have a great doctors group that we contract with to provide. We own the clinics, and then we have a group that provides the personnel that takes care of the team members. So
early 2000s, you're saying, is when the pet business really starts to kick off, correct? And I imagine you've kind of hopped around through the company at that point. And when did you shift to, because you took over CEO in 2012, right?
Yes.
Right. And then when did you shift to like, hey, more kind of leadership in the company, and then also like maybe pushing more sales initiatives? Tell us about that wave of the journey.
Sure. My sort of journey was sales, and then in the poultry side of the business, ended up really being responsible for the customer touch points, R&D, quality, sales and marketing. And then in 2003, I became COO of our chicken side of the business. And then in 2006, got responsibility for our pet food business. At the same time, I had our HR group, IT, and finance and accounting that reported to me as well. So we were transitioning pieces of the business over time.
Sure.
First pieces inside the business, and then and early on, I had spent time when I came back from my sales job, my first job, working in environmental, IT, and HR. And those were areas when I was really young and did not know what I was doing.
Yeah.
And was, quote, responsible for areas, but really learning those areas. And so that was an invaluable time. But then moved back into the business and roles where I was running different segments. So as in 2006, we had made an acquisition and we're integrating that. And there was a major recall in the pet food industry that was a situation where a manufacturer in China was adulterating an ingredient. So they basically were putting melamine, which is effectively a plastic, into protein powders. And so it mimicked in tests. It would look like there was more protein than there actually was. The terrible circumstance was that was going into baby formulas, that was going into pet food formulas. And one of our major competitors, Menu Foods, in the pet food industry, was purchasing from this particular Chinese manufacturer. And a lot of other industry players were as well. We were, just by happenstance, we're not in the segment that we were producing loaf products, not cuts and gravy. And this product was used in cuts and gravy and making the cuts. And so, unfortunately, they had this terrible recall. They survived it. But eventually, as they got the business righted, the family that owned the majority share was ready to sell. And so we decided that this was an opportunity where there were some great team members, great assets, and we could make a shift to being not just a chicken company that did a pretty significant amount of pet food, but really diversify our company.
Mm.
And so we bought Menu Foods in 2010, and it was a Canadian public company. We took them private and have grown the business basically nearly threefold, maybe fourfold now in the last 15 years. So it's been a really nice segment of our business.
And the area at the time, just you personally, and then and your family have had such an impact in Northwest Arkansas. That time, we're kind of coming out of the '90s. Northwest Arkansas Council's forming. Talk about maybe the energy of the businesses collectively as a whole. Your perspective is very unique. Just to someone who's just maybe just coming here for the first time and just understanding like how vital were those years for the area and obviously your business.
I think, during my time, the last 35 years of working here and being back in Northwest Arkansas, I think that, certainly the early days we were underdogs. It felt like you couldn't get a lot of respect saying you were from Arkansas.
Mm.
You certainly, people were like, what is Northwest Arkansas? Why would I move there if you're trying to recruit anybody to come work? And so certainly the Northwest Arkansas Council, which my dad was a founding member of, they were already driving, we've got to have an airport here. Oh, by the way, having one of the largest retailers at the time and one of the largest trucking companies, we probably ought to have more than 2-lane roads in and out of this place. And so, whether it was advocating for this area in our own state, for not to mention nationally, was really a challenge. And I think now, as we've progressed, certainly what's been amazing is these entrepreneurs who've built all the companies that are here certainly did it during a time where it was not easy. And I think that you asked, why is the chicken industry here? Or why, and a lot of people ask me, why are all those big companies located in Northwest Arkansas? And one of the things is, I'm not sure there's anything else you could do other than figure out something to do and work your rear end off. And because if you've tried to dig a hole in Northwest Arkansas to plant crops you can't. It's rock. It's just so we live in a place that's sort of hard scrabble, hills where you're going to have to figure something out to make a living. And luckily there were some really enterprising people that built these businesses. And I think it's a place where there's a lot of that bootstrap mentality. And I'm so proud to be from Arkansas, from this part of Arkansas, and to be able to be here and build something. Because I do have an underdog mentality. I love the fact that if people aren't going to give you credit, fine. Let's show them and never look back. So I think so. Based on that, the change has been really going from, you still get Arkansas, you wear shoes, but a lot less often.
Yep.
And but I think the cool thing is that the different communities in Northwest Arkansas have their own sort of, culture and vibe or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And that's wonderful. I think that there's some really, Siloam Springs is a great place to raise a family. All these, and it's a great, pretty community with a stream that runs through it and this neat downtown. Super proud of being from here. but Fayetteville is a great place all the way up Springdale, and you start seeing these quote emerging communities that are, Centerton, that's just blasted out of nowhere. Rogers and Bentonville and Bella Vista. It's just it's really going to be interesting to see what the next 25 years look like here. And a lot of that foundation was built in the 90s and 2000s, and here we are, and it's really fun to see.
So leading up to you're taking over different realms of the businesses slowly over time. 2012, become CEO. Maybe talk about that transition, and then we want to kind of get to where we're at now. But talk about that transition a little bit.
Sure. I think so. 2012, we were still integrating our pet food business in that acquisition of Menu Foods. I effectively brought on becoming CEO, had a few more direct reports added, but really was still kind of, and you're always learning, hopefully. And so still learning the different aspects of the business, and was able to begin to build a team of folks that really were my team, if you will.
Yeah.
I mean, we had some great leaders that had come through working for my dad and for Lynch, and that was an era that was awesome. And a lot of, as I was running our poultry business, I had built a team there that most of them I had hired or had grown up in the business alongside. And then some of those folks moved over to run parts of our pet food business. And then our animal nutrition business, we had some retirements there and hired some new folks in. And it was, there was a lot of learning there of building a team, and then learning how to lead a team and strategically sort of manage the resource spend. So I'm a big fan of Steve Graves, and he, in fact, in the late 90s, his Cornerstone group back then came in to help us learn strategy and coach some of our executive team, and I was lucky enough to be a part of that as a really young person, and even today, that the things that he talks about ring true. As a CEO, learning how to drive the direction / focus of an organization. How do you manage the speed, pace of initiatives? And then, how do you understand the resource allocation? How do you maintain the culture? These are all things and then how do you manage risk? I think the sooner you can think through those kind of 5 things and kind of begin to balance those, the better. I feel like I'm just now starting to figure that out after 13 years in this seat, and that's an interesting situation where I think we have such a short-term mentality. A positive thing about being a family-owned business is we are patient capital, probably too patient a lot of times. But I think we have, as a society or the financial world, had some really high expectations for human beings. And so CEOs, there's a lot of people get paid too much or whatever. Well, you look at their tenure and it's not very long.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so having, I think, a good measure of grace for leadership, because people are learning.
Mhm.
And I think you look at a Doug McMillan, he's exiting at a much higher level of understanding and performance than when he came in. Now, and he had a long runway to get where he was to even be ready for that role.
Mm.
I think, and kudos to Walmart for having that kind of patience and fortitude and an understanding of how to really allow leaders to come into their own,
Yeah.
if you will. So
How do you create a culture like that, like where leaders can come into their own? There is grace.
It's really hard. I think that I think that you look at, if you can think from a team perspective or a sports team like in basketball or whatever, there are seasons where folks don't perform as well as they normally would, and that season may be inside of any given year
Yeah.
or a
Mhm.
period of time. Some of that may be due to the personal things going on, or just maybe an industry condition. But balancing accountability with um, the learning process and performance, I think you've got to have that element of grace with a healthy dose of okay, now all this is true
Yeah.
Mhm.
and this was a really hard season, but here are the things that we could have done very differently and had a much better outcome.
Mm.
And having those really honest conversations, and then having follow up that said, no, we're not going to go back there. This is where we're headed, and we've learned. And so I think the challenge, though, is convincing maybe those individuals' teammates that they need to have the same perspective and grace. And so I think that transparency around performance is really important. Hey, we didn't do well in this business unit, and here are the things we learned. Everybody on the same page?
Yeah.
We're not going to throw rocks because we're all living in a glass house. So those are some of the things where leading three fairly distinct business units in different industries and or marketplaces. Some are pretty closely related,
Mhm.
but have allowed given me an experience that has been okay. I've learned from this particular experience and can apply it this next year when a similar situation is happening in the animal nutrition business unit.
Mhm.
And market forces or other things that are going on. So, and being really transparent with my team and our executive leadership on, here's what I'm thinking and seeing. Are you all seeing the same thing?
Yeah.
And let's not have sidebar conversations where, so and so still didn't cut it this year or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. We already talked about that.
Yeah.
Mm.
So those are some of the. But being extremely transparent, I think, is one of the keys
to
really
making
good.
that successful.
Yeah.
Talk about risk, because you kind of highlighted how our area was kind of built out of these risk takers. And then I think just summarizing Bill being like the chief risk taker of just even pushing the envelope from an innovation perspective. It sounds like your dad was a risk taker from like a financial perspective, acquisitions, under a lot of financial just obligations from those. How has that formed your appetite or even just how you process risk? And then as you've taken over since 2012, what does that risk look like, in your tenure? No, that's a complicated,
Yes. I think that certainly, I think there's an element of the stage of your career or we talked about before we started parenting and the different risks you're willing to take, maybe with your first child versus your third child or something to that effect, where it's like, they'll be fine, like. And so, but on the other hand, I think in my youth, if you will, I probably didn't recognize or wasn't willing to acknowledge the amount of risk that I was putting the organization through in order to get to a strategic point in the future that I thought we should be. And there may need to be some of that righteous indignation in any entrepreneur or business leader in order to transition an organization to a new place. Now, I think in hindsight, certainly there were many things that I could have done better to really pull in the reins or shift our strategy to be less risky. And so over time, what I think as we look forward, those strategic risks need to happen in relatively smaller chunks. We're a much larger organization today. And so, but incremental strategic investment is sort of our positioning as we look at the future. Continue to keep a balance sheet that's robust, but also build in, hey, how do we manage customer risk in a way where we're very tied to each other and our success is each other's success? How do we build contracts with our customer base that allows us to get an appropriate return, but also manages risk factors like cost of inputs and different things like that, where we don't experience major balance sheet shocks. And so I think maybe as I've gotten older, my risk tolerance is less. It probably, though, is because of experiences of sleepless nights going, man, wish we would have done that different. And how do I get myself or the organization in a better place? So I think that's just, what do they call that? Wisdom? I don't know. But anyway, yeah.
And when we talk about the now, what is your primary focus now, in today's version of the company here?
I think we have the best leadership team, and we have the best sort of go-to-market group or team that's really focused on, do we understand our customers and their needs, and how are we positioning to skate where the puck's going as far as e-commerce or what's happening in the food service industry, and how do we really meet our customers where their needs are. We've played a lot of catch up over time to try to figure out how we need to, what product mixes, what kind of packaging, all those kinds of things. And we will continue to have to do that. But man, we've got a great group of people that understand the marketplace, the products that we think are going to be in demand in the future, and then an operating team that can fulfill that. And so I think building the systems around our teams to be able to, as AI comes into play, to really be able to drive decision making faster, to get the information sorted in a way that our teams can make the best decisions the fastest and be able to deliver to our customers. And so we'll continue to focus on growth, and we'll continue to focus on areas in the business where we can drive efficiency. So there are a lot of really hard jobs in all three of our business units. And how do we figure out how to automate some of those jobs that are really
labor
none
intensive?
of us very labor intensive. No one wants to do that work necessarily. It's work that needs to be done. And so how do we help assist team members and or automate those roles that helps to really drive efficiencies and a better place to work.
Yeah,
frankly,
allow them to do something else.
Right? Yeah. No, that's there's no question. And that's a great thing about the chicken industry as well. Is there's been a lot of automation, and the roles in our operations have become more and more sophisticated, and our team members make more money, and that's all a very good thing.
Can you talk a little bit about the scale of Simmons for someone who's not familiar of it? And it can be whatever whether it's revenue or number, 9,500 employees or whatever that is, but just plants across the U.S., just stuff like that, where people can really get a grasp of, wow, like I did not know they did that, or I did not know they,
Sure. Yes. So we produce, so we're over $3 billion in revenue. We have about 10,000 team members. We have operations in our poultry side of the business here in Northwest Arkansas, really from Fort Smith, Van Buren, up here to Siloam and our Benton County operation. And then in Southwest Missouri, literally Southwest City, Missouri. And then a few operations in Oklahoma. So then we have 4 main pet food operations, one here in Siloam Springs and then 2 in Emporia, Kansas, and 1 in Dubuque, Iowa. And so we then have 4 operations in our animal nutrition group, 2 on the East Coast, in Delaware and Pennsylvania, and then we have 1 in Southwest City and 1 here in Siloam. So it's about 24, 26 facilities, and really just awesome team members running the business 24/7. And so we produce like 65 million cases of pet food. We're certainly one of the largest wet pet food manufacturers in the world. And we make for all the major retailers and all of the major brands. And so that's an exciting thing to see our business continue to grow and expand. And the fun part is when you look at our customer base on the chicken side, it's all the people that you want to go eat at it for lunch or dinner, and all the places that our team members shop, and so it's really been a great to have a strategy that, as we call it, win with the winners, and that the fact is, like, it's happening, and trying to keep up with some of that growth is challenging, but a lot of fun.
That's awesome. And then maybe a business unit that, I mean, My assumption is over the last 10 years, pet food. I mean, I don't know this. You probably have all the numbers in your head, but I don't know what percentage of families own pets. A lot more now than 10 years ago.
Yes,
70, 80%
yes.
is my just a
Right.
guess. So talk about maybe that business unit, the growth y'all have experienced, and just, yeah, how you've kept up with that and
Mhm.
where you see that going.
Sure. I think so. We felt like the pet food business was a great place to be. People love pets. And certainly as the baby boomer generation continued to get a little older, they were going to have more pets. The pet demographic, if you will, has shifted to smaller dogs and more cats. Supposedly, there's more cats in the U.S. now than there are dogs, which is
Wow.
interesting.
Mhm.
Sign of the times, maybe, and not end of times. We love our cat people, and so, but it has been a really great business for us. We in 2010, prior to the menu acquisition, I think we were in the 100 million revenue range, and we're well over $1 billion in revenue today. And so we've had wonderful growth
Mm.
in that business, and we see that continuing. It's certainly more complex, a lot more packaging types,
Mm.
and a lot of innovation happening. The fun part is wet pet food has a lot of opportunity for innovation,
Mm.
and we're excited to be in the middle of that.
Mm.
So, yeah.
And then my last specific business question is a lot of your business is to customers, maybe then it gets to the end consumer.
Mhm.
I'm sure somewhere along this 70 plus year timeline, y'all have talked about, well, should we have a consumer facing brand, or you have had a consumer facing brand? And so how have you stayed focused on what Simmons is good at? And as you guys have built this, or how would you consider that,
Mhm.
a consumer brand versus,
Sure. I think when you grow up in an industry that has massive competitors that have very established brands, Tyson Foods is a
Mhm.
great example. Um, the pet food industry with Alpo or Mars Pedigree, you kind of find places where not where you can hide, but where you can be successful.
Yeah.
And trying to go head to head with major brands is has not been what we think we can be successful doing.
Mhm.
I think that now that has shifted because legacy brands are not out of favor, certainly, but let's say the niche brands are in favor. And so if you can find a place to play when you have more sort of production efficiency and scale, and you can slot those products into those lines, I think that you can be somewhat successful.
Mhm.
In the chicken side of the business, we have typically played in more control type brands, in and out sort of products. We make some fantastic products for our food service customers, and we have awesome R&D that can produce great products for our retail private brands, and some really unique stuff that we can try out. If it does well, then the retailer may want to take it as a regular item. The same in the pet food side of the business. We have brought innovation to our customers in wet pet food, and they've chosen not necessarily to run with that innovation. And so we have taken it into certain products and built some control brands to test that innovation and really understand the consumer. And that's allowing us to figure out, okay, where is the consumer going? Fresh pet food is a big, emerging area of that market. Well, are there versions of that product that may be shelf stable that don't directly compete with some of our customers on the fresh pet food side that customers may want to try out. So we've done some of that, and we will continue to see where that goes, and understand, really to try to understand the consumer.
It's cool.
Well, we want to be respectful of your time. Just kind of getting towards where we're wrapping up here. Couple more questions toward the end. I feel it from talking to you here, and I've just heard it a lot. You have such a personal responsibility. You feel personal responsibility for the growth of the area and for Simmons Foods. When you think about the future, what is your vision for the future of the next generation in Northwest Arkansas?
Well, that's a big question. I do really appreciate getting to grow up in a place like Northwest Arkansas, where you see these really, whether it's business people or community leaders who've done so much, and so you're sort of like, wow, that is unbelievable achievement, and it continues to happen with people from here. I mean, you don't have to be born in Northwest Arkansas to be a Northwest Arkansan, I guess. But what's fun is to see the people who have grown up inside of these organizations, whether it's JB Hunt or Tyson or Walmart, which are all, by the way, family businesses, really. But many of the leaders who've been really successful are from here, and they run large organizations. And the same can be said for our communities and all that. My perspective is really the business community. And so my hope is that next generation sees that and goes, yeah, you don't have to be, I mean, it's fine if you go to Harvard or go to wherever, but you don't have to be, quote, a genius or, quote, special. We can be ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And to continue to, whether it's starting your own business or working inside an organization like Simmons Foods or Walmart or whatever organization, that you can do amazing things, and it takes just humility, grace for other people, and a lot of hard work. And so that's sort of my hope, is that we continue doing that. That folks that are bootstrapping their business today here will continue to drive that, and that many of us who can help remove barriers for that kind of growth and innovation and business building and community building, for that matter. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's a stewardship mentality, really, of not only thinking about our family business, but thinking about the areas where we live, work, and play. And how do we steward this to be a great place that's not a concrete jungle, that's not, how do we protect the things that make this place special, but then also lean into the future. And so I think it can be done, and just look at the last 30 years of folks that have been doing it here, and it's pretty amazing.
You believe in the future of it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. How do you define success?
Oh man. So, so I think, was it Carlos Slim, who is a a successful business person in Mexico, talked about, I'm not trying to build a better world for my kids. I'm trying to build better kids for the world. And so I think seeing my kids become young adults, wanting them to be just productive humans in the world and care about people, that's the most success you can have, because you can easily not have that by focusing on work and or being involved in other things other than being a parent and raising your children. And so, certainly it's great to be able to do those things and also have great kids. But if you miss that, and all the cliches of looking at a couple of guys that have younger kids, it's true. Like, you blink and they will be out of the house. And it's hard. It's hard to frame your mind around wanting your kids to be successful and go do things, and then also be like, but don't you remember you were just this, you wanted me to read to you, when you went to bed. And so just, don't wish away their childhood, for sure. But as we talked about, man, it's hard when they're young, and it gets hard when they fly the nest or the coop, to use a chicken
there you
analogy. So, yeah, raising great kids for the world would be probably the best definition of success.
That's cool. Well, one of the things we do at the end of every episode is we just try to highlight what we learned today, Cameron and I learned, and then what we think people who listen to this podcast, who are in Northwest Arkansas or in the business community, are going to learn from you, Todd. And I think the first thing that was very clear from the moment we were in your office and you gave us this book talking about your grandfather is innovation. And everybody's gifted at different things. And you kind of even said you feel like that's the vein that runs closest to you and your grandfather, is this idea and this desire for innovation. And so I think the two examples that you gave were people and business. So that the healthcare perspective, I think I said, it's just aggressive. Yeah. And you walk that on a timeline 20 years ago. That's almost crazy.
Right.
And so I just think that's like pushing the boundary of innovation. And it's been at the benefit of your people. And so thank you for that. And then I think this idea of pet food, 20 years ago, I don't think anybody would have put a dot and forecasted where pet food was going to go. And so from a business perspective, a lot of innovation, and from a people perspective, a lot of innovation as well. So super, super clear. I think the second one is values, and just seeing that from the people we've interacted with, from the people we know who work here, from this conversation today, it's just very clear that y'all are a value-centric organization. And the way people are treated, the things that are important, it's all stems from your values. And so I think the piece that was really clear, you talking about the Chaplain program, the words that I wrote down were meeting people where they are. And if you have employees, which we both do in our own businesses, people go through hard things. Mm-hmm. And to create a system, you have I think you said 10,000 employees or something now, to create a system where you can actually help employees with those hard things, not just say, well, that's your home life. When you're at work, I need you to be laser focused. Like those things are connected. Right. And I don't know, just hearing about that, it's very clear that stems from the values that you have, that your dad had, that your grandfather had, and that now these leaders that have multiplied across your organization have. So really, really cool to hear that. Absolutely. And then the last piece is impact. I think your personal impact on team members who work here that we know, your personal impact on the Northwest Arkansas Council in our area is just, it's undeniable. And then I think the one thing, and I don't even know if I told you this, but I was outside with Anita making coffee before this, and she told me, she's like, when I started, there was a couple that worked in a plant, and they just retired. And she said they had over 80 years of combined experience at Simmons Foods between them. And that doesn't happen, Todd, unless you have an impact on your employees' lives. And so just really clear hearing that in this conversation out there. It's just, it's really clear that is a focal point of yours and your leaders. So thanks for all that you do in our community. Thanks for your time today. And this was awesome.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thanks for your time, y'all, coming over to Siloam. It's an easy drive, right?
Yeah.
More people should do it.
Not bad. Thanks, Todd.
Thanks.